IT department. We'll go ahead and get started. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order of the Pinellas County Charter Review Commission. My name is Brian Ongst. I'm the board chair, and I will ask the other commissioners to introduce themselves, starting with my vice chair on my right.
Hi, my name is Dr. Lindsay Grove. I'm the vice chair, and I was a public at-large citizen appointee.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Good to be here. My name is Dave Eggers. I'm a county commissioner, and I represent the county commission on the board.
Good evening, Mark Strickland, appointed by Janet Law.
Hi, Rob Posovic, and I was appointed by Commissioner Eggers.
Good evening, Todd Jennings, public at large citizen appointee.
Good evening, Ricky Butler, appointed by Kathleen Peters.
Good evening, Happy New Year, Terry Lipsy Scott, Renee Flowers appointee.
Good evening, I'm Tom Steck, appointed by Charlie Justice Commissioner.
Good evening, I'm Anne Marie Brooks. I am a municipal elected official appointee.
And I know we have Commissioner Overend on Zoom. I'm not sure if you are able to introduce yourself, Commissioner Overend.
Can you hear me, sir?
We can, yes, thank you.
Okay. Ashley Overend, appointed by Commissioner Brian Scott.
Thank you and welcome. And Mr. Vose and Mr. Thomas, do you want to introduce yourselves as well?
And Doug Thomas, facilitator to the Charter Review Commission.
All right. We do have 2 cards for public comment. We'll start with Miss Julie Vane. If you could come up to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes. Yeah, just right up there to the podium. And as soon as you're ready to start, you'll have your 3 minutes to provide your comment.
Hello, everybody. My name is Julie Vane. I live in Seminole, Florida, and I'm here representing Friends of Pinellas County. We are a citizens activist group that worked diligently a year and a half ago, 2 years ago almost, working on getting petitions signed to have a charter amendment brought before the voters for 8 years is enough in Pinellas County commissioners' term limits. We feel very strongly, the citizens of Pinellas County feel very strongly that if 8 years is good for our president and our governor and many of our elected officials, that is good for our county commissioners. Right now, as you know, we do not have any term limits for our county commissioners. And we've seen a budget that has blossomed and just grown exponentially, and spending in this county that we feel is out of control. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when a legislator or a commissioner is filling that position for over and over again for many years, they become very entrenched and they become very used to green-lighting many projects. We have tens of thousands of signatures that we collected. Unfortunately, we did not meet what we needed to meet to get the question on the ballot, but we have bumped all those numbers up, and I spent many hours, and many other people did spend many hours verifying the voters, verifying their addresses and their registration, and then bumping those up against other databases with contact information. We have a way to contact these people and bring them out. So we really are expecting this Charter Review Commission to put 8 years on for the Charter Review for question to the voters, and we would like to see you all do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment. Thank you, ma'am. Next card I have is Mr. David Ballard Geddes Jr. Thank you, sir.
Hi, good evening. David Ballard Geddes Jr. I live at 802 Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor. Pinellas County Home Rule Charter is being used to transfer county function and power as revealed in section 2.04Q of the charter, shape-shifting, insurrecting, and privatizing government. The charter sheds light to an interlocal agreement bringing into focus Statute 163.01, the Interlocal Cooperation Act of 1969. The Interlocal Cooperation Act of 1969, as revealed in Statute 163.01, gives rise to a separate foreign legal entity in and of our current political structure. It creates special districts to support this foreign legal entity in recognition of the district not to exceed 10 miles square in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of our current Constitution. The Interlocal Cooperation Act subjects us to a foreign levy reflective of the non-ad valorem levy interpositioned, insurrected in on the county ad valorem property tax lien as part of their acquisition process. Such internal foreign entity has been given the rights to exercise powers of eminent domain based on the reclaimed water variance application stemming from Statute 15303, Section 5. In an extreme act of prejudice and secularism, the internal foreign legal entity is intent on privatizing government through local downtown redevelopment zones in Statute 163.345. Such foreign interlocal entity is capable of its own rulemaking, issuing bonds on behalf of itself as recognized in Statute 218.415, Section 16F. The county charter is intent on enacting such special district powers as water jurisdictions 10 miles square under the 14th Amendment, as enumerated in Section 2.01 of the Charter, in recognition of the enumeration clause of Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. current Constitution, directly taxing the civilian population. Meanwhile, hypocritically, they themselves, those who are imposing such levy, they are not required to pay taxes of any kind whatsoever based on the 14th Amendment, and that this interlocal foreign legal entity of such is exempt from all laws, ordinances, and rules while carpetbagging the residents claimed as due process thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next comment is from Barbara Hazelton.
David, you're a hard act to follow. You're welcome. So I wanted to speak about the citizens petition requirements. And the last time, 8 years ago, we were able to get on the ballot to drop from 10% of registered voters to 8%. The last election in 2020, we had 710,000 voters in Pinellas County that were registered to vote. And so we, as last time I talked about, that 8 is enough term limits, got an attorney, set up the whole process with the supervisor of elections, had many, many people all throughout the county, Democrats, Republicans alike, working on trying to get term limits through for county commissioners. And so when you have 700,000 at 8%, that's 56,000 petitions, plus you have to figure another 15 or 20% for those that would be thrown out, which meant that we had the goal of something like 66,000 petitions that we had to gather. And we found that to be impossible. And if we had had the money, which my nonprofit, we spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on this initiative for the citizens of Pinellas County, who I continue to feel we really got the outcome of an election stolen all those years ago for the term limits. And so the citizens are coming back again, trying to do something about it last year. And we have tens of thousands, as Julie said, of petitions in my garage. And they're in boxes in my garage. And so, as she said, we entered them all on databases. But when you think about that, if you're running for office, you only have to get maybe 2,000 petitions to run for county commission. I don't think that's fair. So I just want to say to you, I hope that we dropped it last time from 10% through the efforts of myself and my friends to come back and to talk about this. We had the time extended from 180 days to 240. The last charter review went for that. And we had it dropped from 10 to 8. And eight's too high. Eight's enough for county commissioners, but it's too high for petitions. And so I hope that you'll discuss the idea of giving the citizens a chance to actually get something on the ballot successfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hazelton. Do we have any other public comments? I don't see anybody. Well, I don't think I have anybody on Zoom.
There is somebody in there, Chair.
Okay, is that Mr. Sanford?
Yes.
Mr. Sanford, are you wishing to speak? If so, can you raise your hand in Zoom and let our professionals know that you'd like to speak?
I am not wishing to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Welcome aboard. Okay, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the November 27th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, make a motion to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Butler, second. Anybody? Commissioner Eggers? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to new business. Review and discussion regarding Section 6.02, Charter Initiative, Citizen Initiative, Persons, and Referenda, signature percentage and time period for charter amendment petition drives. I did want to start this conversation by saying that I had a great call this afternoon with our county attorney, Jewel White. She informed me that our supervisor of elections, Julie Marcus, is in Tallahassee, and so she cannot be here tonight. But there will be ample opportunity for her to come and speak with us about the technicalities and the procedure of her office and processing these types of petitions, timing in terms of getting signatures verified, getting ballots prepared, those types of things. I think that it's obviously important for us to understand the practicalities of how the Supervisor of Elections office is affected by what we're proposing and how that actually works. So what I'm saying is that Supervisor Marcus, I believe, will be coming to a forthcoming meeting to give her perspective on the process. But we're going to have what I hope is a robust introductory to the topic tonight. And there was one specific area that Attorney White requested us to look at that I will reserve until we get into the topic.
How about that? Much better. All right. Commissioners, good evening. We have two new items of new business before you tonight. As the chairman indicated, both election and charter amendment related. The first one we're going to be addressing, and we threw up the agenda on the projector here to keep track, but I'm going to be switching back and forth to the memoranda I provided to the CRC. First item we're going to be discussing is an item that was brought up in public comment just moments ago, and that was an item raised by a Charter Review Commissioner relating to signature percentages and time periods for the for Pinellas County Charter Amendment petition drives. The current Pinellas County Charter provides in section 6.02 for petition drives for members of the public to propose. Did that come through, or did I lose it? What the? There we go. We're still working this out. For members of the public to propose amendments to the Pinellas County Charter. As was alluded to in public comment, back in 2016, the Charter Review Commission proposed a charter amendment that amended the then current requirements for signature thresholds. It previously had been that 10% of registered voters in the county had to sign a petition within, at that time, a 180-day period in order to qualify to get a proposed charter amendment on the ballot. The proposal from the 2016 Charter Review Commission, which went on the ballot and was successful, was to lower those numbers from 10% of voters to 8% of voters, and to expand the time from 180 days to 240 days. We provided in the memo both a copy of the entire charter initiative provision in the charter, if you're curious about other provisions in it, as well as what the ballot summary was for that question, so you all can start getting familiar with how ballot summaries coming out of the Charter Review Commission might look. Of most interest, I would suggest, to the CRC would be the chart that was provided. We've looked at these previously, prepared by the Florida Association of Counties, putting together the relevant provisions concerning amending county charters by petition in all 20 charter counties. This chart runs down the percentage required in those various counties and the time limits to gather signatures. One other requirement or one other factor that we'll be discussing in the next item as well, it's also shown on this table, is which elections a charter amendment, whether it's by petition or by other means, which election such a charter amendment proposal can be put on. One thing I would note, some folks find it interesting when they look over on the side and see this column for voting requirements. You'll see that all the counties in the state say majority except one, Polk County. This is not to call out Polk County, but I will share with you there is current controlling case law in the state of Florida that says the threshold can only be majority for an amendment to the county charter. Nevertheless, it remains printed as 60% in the Polk County Charter. From what I hear, that is in fact what they enforce, but nobody's done anything about it. As indicated, these are the percentages and time limits that are provided for the 20 charter counties. As you can see, they vary substantially among the counties. And Chairman, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions at this point for Mr. Vose regarding the presentation? Yes, Commissioner Strickland.
Thank you for the presentation. Just real quick, 8% seems like an interesting number, and obviously there's only one other, is Hillsborough, correct, if I'm reading that, in the state?
That's, looks like it's so, yes, sir.
Okay. Any reasoning for the 8?
My recollection on the particular reasoning was vague. I think it was just a desire to lower it by some discrete round number. I do recall that the Charter Review Commission at that time did take a look at numbers throughout the state at that time. And there have been other changes over time. At that time, I can tell you from personal experience in 2016 in Orange County did the opposite. Orange County increased their numbers. So in Orange County, you had the numbers increasing. In Pinellas County, you had the numbers going down.
Commissioner Steck?
I've heard this once before, that someone thinks I'm the historian for the commission. That is not at all the case, but as I recall, the discussion was a compromise. Some folks were shooting for a lower number, and then some wanted to leave it where it was. So that is, as I say, for what it's worth.
Yes, Commissioner Pasovich.
Yeah, my question is whether anyone has any knowledge of whether there would be some unintended consequences of having a significantly lower number. In other words, in Brevard, where it's 4%, do they have an instance of an inordinate amount of ballot requests or amendments come before the voters?
It's a good question. In my observation, and I've not followed it, I've followed it a fair bit. I have a number of local government clients in Brevard County. I was general counsel for Brevard County Charter Review Commission in 2016 as well. So I haven't followed every single potential petition drive, but even in Brevard, I don't recall any actually getting on the ballot by petition in recent years. One thing I will note, little quirk about Brevard that I just happen to know off the top of my head, they do have a stopgap in their charter petition process, and that is they have a 3-attorney panel that after a charter amendment by petition goes through the process, it goes in front of that 3-attorney panel. They review it to see whether or not it's constitutional and otherwise legal, and if they find that it's not, they throw it out, even if they get all of the petitions. In past times, it's not happened recently, but in past times when it has gone through that of course has almost always yielded litigation.
Commissioner Butler?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And this is probably better discussion if we get Supervisor Marcus here. But in Ms. Hazelton's comments, she did make a good point as far as the requirement for county-wide office, and it's at 1% of the registered voters. So obviously, amending the charter is a bigger deal than, this is a bigger exercise, and I understand that, but 8 times higher is significant. So just wanted to point that out.
Just a few comments and thoughts. So one of the areas that Attorney White specifically mentioned for me to mention is that our charter has this language that says the supervisor of elections shall approve the ballot language, which is very unusual from what I understand. So Florida constitutional law requires that a ballot question have 15 words or less in the ballot title and have 75 words or less in the actual ballot language, and that it's single subject unless you're Charter Review Commission or the Constitutional Revision Commission for the state, which we're obviously not, and that it cannot be misleading, Mr. Vose, or confusing. Is that basically it?
That's correct. It's got to state the chief purpose of the amendment. It cannot fly under false colors or be misleading or hide the ball. These are all the different euphemisms the courts use.
And so our charter would in some ways, if you're interpreting it very literally, suggest that the supervisor and her office approve of the ballot language and say it checks all those boxes, which is really not an appropriate function for her office to be doing. Now, clearly, they can figure out if there's 15 words or less or 75 words or less, but in terms of making that legal determination of whether it's misleading or it's single subject, it's probably not an appropriate function to place on the supervisor and her office. So that's something that Attorney White asked us to look at. And that's not to say that there has to be a process like Brevard has. I have been ancillarily involved in referenda litigation over the years at the municipal level. In that case, the city attorney essentially drafted the language. So if the city attorney's drafted, like we have Attorney Vose is drafting the language, Attorney Vose is not going to present us with language that he feels is unconstitutional. If someone objects to it, then they file a lawsuit and the circuit court figures it out. And in that case, the referendum language was upheld. But the point is that I don't know that it's even necessary to have an approval process or a sign-off process at the county level because these will be petitions that are originated by citizens, specifically about what we're talking about. And if someone wants to litigate over that, then they're free to do that. So I'm not sure that we need to have that. I certainly wouldn't want to have a situation where citizens go out and get a petition and do all that work and then 3 random attorneys assigned by the county throw it out. That doesn't seem very fair to me. Constitutional referenda in Florida are reviewed by the Florida Supreme Court under that very narrow perspective of what we just outlined. But of course, we don't have the Florida Supreme Court here to approve the referenda before they get put on the ballot. So I would say that I think we ought to just get rid of that language or revise it to make it clear. It's just regarding the number of words and not necessarily blessing the otherwise legality of the question, and then leave that up to the courts to figure out if someone wanted to litigate over that. Does anyone have thoughts on the actual numbers? I think it would be helpful for the supervisor's office to hear kind of our initial thoughts. If we wanted to lower it, if we were thinking about lowering it, we're thinking about lowering it to 5%, 6%, 7%. What are we thinking about lowering it to? Are we not thinking about lowering it? We're not going to make a decision tonight. This is the first conversation, but I think it would be important for our staff here and also the supervisor's office to understand what we have in mind potentially. Commissioner Jennings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I echo your sentiments on the supervisor review. I think we have a court system and we have trained judges, and that's what they're there for. As far as numbers, Attorney Voss, I don't know if you're familiar with Duval, but I was just looking at the number of registered voters in these counties. Duval seems the most similarly situated to us. They have 640,000, and they're at 5%, so that would put them at about 32,000, and you consider 20%, you're only having to get about 38,000 petitions. So I don't know if 5% is the right number, but I'm looking more at somewhere between that 38,000 and what we're required to do here. I guess my question in Duval is the question that some others have had regarding, is Duval a place where there's been a rush to gather petitions and get a lot of junk amendments on the charter, or has that been a pretty good threshold?
Duval, and I'll repeat this over and over again through all this, Duval County, Jacksonville, and Miami-Dade County are always, a little bit of outliers when it comes to the 20 charter counties. But in this respect, everything I've heard, I've not heard of a great rush to the supervisor's office to have all manner of different petitions or what have you. But again, that may or may not be so. It just has not come across my desk to observe it.
Commissioner Eggers.
Thank you, Chair. So just curious on like Volusia and Sarasota, Palm Beach, and Miami-Dade, all silent on time limit to gather signatures. What does that mean? So they can go on, they can start now, 4 years down the road, bring it together?
I would need to go and revisit the exact language to see what Florida Association of County is denoting there. But yes, that is something you find in a number of them, where basically you can start collecting and there's no end. Once you get enough, you can give it a go and get it on the ballot.
And I'd be curious, just the chair allowing. I'm trying to understand that obviously the number of days and the percentage are interrelated, but if like this, the last go around, it was both, and was the wording, right? And the two pieces were together. Which one, from people that have been on this out there doing it, would have made it slightly easier to, if you changed one or the other, if you went from 8 to 6, or you went from 240 to 300, which one of those two, I'm not saying both necessarily, but which one of those two would have made it an easier task?
Mrs. Hazelton, if you'd like to respond to that, I'll ask you to come up to the podium. And I think the specific question is, was it the threshold percentage of registered voters, or was it the time frame? And how would that have made a difference if it was 5% and you still had 240 days, for example?
Based on the amount of activity that we were able to generate, to be honest with you, I think that going to 240 days, I was involved in that back then. And to go from 180 to 240, I felt fixed that concern, because it's hard to keep that much momentum going with that many people away from their families and stuff and spending their spare time knocking on doors or going to events. It's the 8% of this large of a population. So that, I think, is what, 5%, 240, I think is a fair discussion.
Thank you.
That was helpful for me as well. That was very helpful. And I certainly can't speak for the supervisor because I haven't spoken to her about it, but I would assume that my concern is, like Commissioner Pasovic said, unintended consequences, and is the supervisor going to have enough time to actually verify the petitions and those types of things? I would assume that the 240 days exists, so that would be okay. But that's something we can ask her, or she can discuss when she comes. And then, of course, lowering the percentage would be less work, right? Because instead of having to look at, 70,000, you're looking at whatever, 40,000 or 50,000. Any other comments, thoughts? Yes, Mr. Steck, Commissioner Steck.
One thing I would say, if whether it's the supervisor of elections or a court or some entity, someone ought to be reviewing the language, because for folks to run around and gather all these petitions, and then it turns out that what's on the ballot is unconstitutional, would be a major waste of time. So some sort of a review mechanism just to make sure things are legally phrased, I think might be a good idea.
So maybe what I'd ask Mr. Vose is if you could take a look at what these other counties do in terms of that part of it. Because I don't disagree with Commissioner Steck that, not every petitioner is going to have the resources to have their language reviewed. You would think that a movement that had the resources to obtain 5% of the signatures would probably be pretty organized, because that's still not an easy task. But I'd like to get more information about what did the other counties do in terms of that.
I could share with you off the top of my head, I know what the two counties that have such processes do in these instances here. I can discuss them a little bit to the point. So I mentioned Brevard County has a 3-attorney panel that takes a look at it. Orange County actually has a similar, not exactly the same, but a similar process for their initiative petitions. Now, I will warn you to look at Orange County's initiative petition process. It is pages long. It is exceedingly detailed. One of the major differences I would just offer to the earlier point about timing for supervisors of elections is it's much more similar to what is done with state constitutional amendments, in that when petitions are gathered within a given period of time, they have to be turned in for counting within a particular period of time. So they don't sit out there and are stale. This helps with supervisors so that supervisors are not in a situation where they get in the big stack at the end. Not advocating one way or the other, just sharing with you all that was the thought there. But back to the evaluation of it on the front end, all right? Let me give you a general caution on the thought of it, all right? Nowhere in the state do you have a situation where the government, the charter county, is effectively providing an attorney for these folks in the public, all right? In any instance, in all 20 of these charter counties, it is, in the first instance, incumbent upon the folks who are looking to collect these signatures to get with an attorney. Get with an attorney who understands how ballot referenda work, who understand how ballot summaries are required under 101.161, and so on, to go through that. And I've seen examples where you see incredibly fine work. I've seen other ones where it's clear they didn't catch that was a wise step. In any event, the processes that you have out there outside of the most common one, which is going through the court, is in Orange County and in Brevard County, after it meets certain thresholds, it goes to the 3-attorney panel, and what they do is just say yay and nay. All right? They say, yes, we find it's constitutional and it's meets the ballot summary requirements, or it's not. And if they throw it out there, it stops it, and that more than half the time ends up in court for a court to decide whether or not they agree with that 3-attorney panel, and then the counting can potentially start again. All right? So mostly those processes are there to stop extra government work, if you will. Basically, stop it early in the process if this thing is going to crash into a wall from a legality standpoint. Yeah. It's not an incredibly valuable feedback loop for the folks trying to come in with it. The problem is, short of a county saying they're going to hire local government attorneys for anybody interested in looking to do that, it's difficult to get to that point.
Right. And I was going to ask, so just because this 3-attorney volunteer panel says yay, that doesn't mean that someone else can't litigate over whether they were correct or not. So it's essentially it's a non-binding opinion.
Yeah, it means not a win.
If you don't check that box, you don't get on the ballot, and then if you're the petitioner, then you can initiate the litigation to challenge that non-binding opinion. And I mean, as someone who deals with local governments every day, it's an incredibly fine line and incredibly difficult, because the government cannot be in the position of providing legal advice to, the applicant. And in this case, if you're a petitioner, you're an applicant. Just like somebody who's trying to put a fence up or a pool or build a hotel or whatever, and the onus is on the applicant to do it correctly. And so we don't want to be in a position where our county attorney or our supervisor of elections is rewriting petitions and essentially becoming the applicant or becoming the advocate for an issue. So I understand both sides of that discussion. I think it's something that Attorney White at least made me aware of, that she was concerned about the current language, because it does seem to put the impetus on the supervisor to approve the language. And again, that just seems inappropriate for many reasons. But more thoughts, comments? Yes, Commissioner Butler.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A question and then maybe a comment. So I noticed Seminole County, Mr. Vose, 7.5% residing in 3/5. Am I interpreting that's 7.5% of 3/5 of the population? What's happening? That's interesting.
Great question, because I should know that one.
There must be 5 commission districts.
There are 5 commission districts, yeah.
Okay, so
I should know that. I used to be the general counsel for the Seminole County Supervisor of Elections, but it is not coming to me.
Okay. So perhaps 7.5% of 3/5 of the
times
districts.
3/5, yeah, as the total number, and I can.
So, because the reason I'm asking is just, again, because I think I'm kind of stuck on the 1% requirement for county commission and constitutionals that are or county-wide rather. Like, that's a huge discrepancy. So I'm just curious, like, if there's a backstory, if they were trying to lower the number without lowering the percentage, or it's just odd.
I've got the answer, and I will tell you, it's always profitable to dig behind some of the general summaries from the Florida Association of Counties, because what Seminole County's charter provides is that amendments to the Home Rule Charter may be proposed by petition signed by a number of electors residing in at least 3/5 of the county commission election districts and of the county as a whole, equal to 7.5%. What that's basically saying is you need 7.5% from the county as a whole, but it can't all be from one district.
And we have similar language. Ours says at least equal to 8% of the number of registered voters of the county. No more than 40% of those registered electors signing petitions shall reside in any one at-large county commission district of the 3. No more than 30% of those registered electors signing petitions shall reside in any one of the single-member county commission districts of the 4.
Yeah. The purpose of that and similar provisions like the one in Seminole is so that a charter amendment cannot receive substantially all of its petition gathering from just one of the commission districts so that it has a broad base of support. I will share with you, though, and that's why I was racking my brain here, Orange County's charter used to work, it was changed in 2016, used to work precisely as you say. It was X percentage in a majority of the districts, which was interpreted by the county attorney and the supervisor of elections to mean you take 4 out of 7 times that number, and that's what they needed to get, which meant it was a fairly low number.
One more thing, Mr. Chair. Of course. So sometimes you just have ideas that float in your head, then you're like, no, that's a stupid idea, but then that's an insane explanation you just had to offer. So, for county commission, or county-wide office, it's 1% of folks that participated in the general election, of registered voters as of the last general election. And obviously the intent of this is to make sure that voters are engaged. You're reaching engaged voters. This is it's the will of the voters to do this. Something else to throw out there would be whatever percentage of voters that participated in the last general election. If we can't agree on a number, that's still data that the supervisor's office could obviously provide. So basically, if you look at 2020, for example, you didn't have all 700 some odd thousand participating, but just an alternative way to lower the number, because the intent is to make sure. It doesn't have to be. It can be as many, but that threshold, I just think it's very high comparatively to another countywide office petition.
And Chairman, just the thought to that, if you were going to tie it to a metric of voters who participated versus registered voters in the last election, you need to get to a very precise definition of what you mean by participated. Mm-hmm. As you know, we have undervotes. Folks will come in and vote just for president and then for nothing else.
Sure.
Does that count?
I would say
counting for
votes,
one of the county commissioners. You'd have to get to a very precise. I'm not saying it couldn't be done. Mm-hmm. It's just a thing that would have to be thought through if you went to that alternative paradigm.
Makes sense.
Yes, Commissioner Steck.
The thought occurs to me that we're kind of comparing apples and oranges. On the one hand, we're looking at proposing laws that can affect the entire population of a county over years versus, let's say, for example, we took that percentage and raised it to qualify for an election, to run for office, and raise that to 8%. Then we're blocking people's right to represent the people in government. So I don't know that comparing the percentage for laws versus a chance to run for office is really an even comparison, an appropriate comparison.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments, questions, concerns? We will invite the supervisor to a forthcoming meeting. Does anyone want to provide any kind of, try to get any kind of consensus? I mean, I'm not sure we have enough information to have any consensus at this point. My thought personally would be, I would be interested in exploring 5% of registered voters. I think the 240 days, if you look at the amount of time the other counties provide, it seems about right. Some are 9 months, some are 6 months, some are 180. I do believe that 8% of registered voters in Pinellas County is an extremely high burden, which makes it very unlikely that anybody would get a petition on the ballot by signature, unless they had, a couple $1 million and had a year's worth of time and people on the ground to do it, which, again, seems almost impossible for someone to do. So those are my personal thoughts. I'm not asking you all to endorse those, but I'm just trying to find the bunkers that we're going to give to the supervisor for when she comes. What does she need to anticipate that we're thinking about? Yes, Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and with all, I think we need to keep it as simple as possible. I think there are a lot of ways to get at ideas and things, but I think keeping it as simple as we can do it, and lowering that to 5% makes it a much easier threshold, but not easy. You're still got a ways to go. 240 days seems like a lot of time, but I'm sure when you get out there to the point of, boots on the ground, trying to make it happen, it's still not a lot of time, but it's enough if you can lower that threshold. So I kind of like the idea of looking at that 5% and doing the 240 days. I kind of agree with that.
Anybody else for now? Again, we'll have more. Yes, Commissioner Jennings.
I support lowering the threshold. One thing I hope we don't entertain is messing with the multi-district requirement. Obviously the demographics of the county, you can see where you might have some things driven by North County, some things driven by South County, competing petitions, all that sort of stuff. So I think it'd probably behoove us to maintain the multi-district requirement.
All right. If there's nothing further on this right now, I'd ask Mr. Thomas at your leisure and Mr. Vose to get with the county attorney and the supervisor to see about when one of our next meetings, whenever she's available, doesn't have to be the very next meeting, but at some point in the next month or so, for Supervisor Marcus to join us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And obviously what we're trying to do at this meeting this evening is start to unpack some of the topics, and we knew that it's going to be hitting you cold, but we're trying to get some feedback so we can get future speakers and address whatever remaining questions may come from the panels.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is item 5A2, proposed Pinellas County Charter amendments on general elections versus non-general elections.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a related topic relating to elections for charter amendments, both for charter amendments proposed by initiative petition and charter amendments by the two other main methods set forth in the Pinellas County Charter. As you recall, there are three methods in the charter for amending the charter: proposal by the Board of County Commissioners, by initiative petition by the voters, and by the Charter Review Commission. So first, Section 601 of the Charter authorizes the Board of County Commissioners to propose charter amendments by ordinance passed by an affirmative vote of not less than a majority plus one member. Relating to the scheduling of a charter amendment proposed by the Board of County Commissioners, the charter provides any such amendment shall be subject to referendum at the next scheduled countywide election, providing, however, that the Board of County Commissioners may call a special referendum for said purpose. So it's the default is the next scheduled countywide election. That is not necessarily the next general election in November in even-numbered years. It could be, for example, the presidential preference primary in March of presidential years. It could be the August primary in even-numbered years. And the Board of County Commissioners has the authority to call a special referendum election out of cycle. As to initiative petitions, 6.02, we discussed this, or it was referenced on the chart there previously. With regard to initiative petitions, the Charter provides each charter amendment proposed by petition shall be placed on the ballot by resolution of the Board of County Commissioners for the next general election occurring in excess of 90 days from the certification by the Supervisor of Elections that the requisite number of signatures have been verified. However, the County Commissioners may call special referendum election for said purpose. So let's be clear about this. The default, even with this provision, is that charter amendment would go on a general election ballot, so the November ballot in an even-numbered year, all right? However, there is authority for the Board of County Commissioners to call a special referendum election to hear that charter amendment by petition and have it on an election date, not that date in November. This may sound, I will just share little bits of war stories. This may sound esoteric, but such strategy, I'm not suggesting it would occur here in Pinellas County, but such strategy has been directly discussed and planned in other counties, including the county I live in. evaluating, looking at bumping, using provisions like this to move an election from the default to another election. And there are all manner of reasons. And again, this goes to the substance of the discussion about what election should charter amendments be on. There are all manner of different political reasons why one group or another may want to have charter amendments, for example, on a general election ballot versus a special election out of cycle and so on. Some of these relate to turnout of particular groups versus other groups and so on. Finally, moving on to the Charter Review Commission. Charter Review Commission is pretty straightforward. The charter amendments proposed by the Charter Review Commission in all instances go on the general election ballot in on the 8-year cycle, which means they go on the ballot on the general election of every other presidential year cycle. This discussion, or this charter topic in previous discussion was prompted by a trend and a question that came up among Charter Review commissioners early on, that hasn't the legislature said that all this stuff has got to be on the general election anyways? Well, that is a very easy conclusion to come to, because that has been the legislative trend from the Florida legislature. A number of different local government referenda that are provided for in the Florida statutes. In recent years, the Florida legislature has amended to change it from being able to be on any election they want, or to be able to call special elections and so on, to say just on the general election. There's a whole list, as I put in the memo, whole list of different local government referenda in section 212.055. Those have to do with 9 different types of discretionary local sales surtaxes. The legislature amended that in recent times to say all of those have to be on the November ballot only, no other election. The legislature also just recently, last session, did some moving of some additional referenda. In those instances, all dealing with money, effectively, and taxation for the most part, but again, moved those to the general election. So, as I noted, generally, there's some variety in what elections these go on in Pinellas County. Provided in the memo as well is this same chart we looked at before with regard to charter amendments by petition. You'll see in the various counties, a lot of them have general elections, some have special elections. Palm Beach expressly calls out general or presidential primary. And then scrolling down to Charter Review Commission, most of them are on the general election, consistent with how Pinellas works. Sarasota is a bad example. Sarasota has a Charter Review Commission that sits perpetually, so they're not a good model to look to. With regard to charter amendments by the county commission, as you'll see, a number of charters do say general election only. Some say basically any election that they would like, but predominantly it is general election. So, Chairman, that's my general overview, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
So if I can try to summarize that. If it's being proposed by the Pinellas County Commission, it can be the next countywide or special election. The next countywide election, in this case, if they were to put an initiative on now, they could put it on August, because that's a countywide primary election. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
But that doesn't
If they did a
require
little
them-
earlier, they could get it on March, but presidential
not
preference
presidential preference primary. You're right. That's
That's
right.
one to keep in mind. It's would be too late to do it now, I would suggest, but.
Right. But this doesn't require them to do that. For example, if they were to do a county commission originated charter amendment, they could say, we're going to put it on November of 2024.
It could, absolutely.
Okay. So it's essentially flexibility.
It is.
Okay. And then if it was proposed by our board, it would go on the general election that would follow our report, which would always be November of 8 years from now. And then if it was proposed by citizens, it has to go on the general election that is at least 90 days from the verification of the ballot initiative, which would be the petitions, the sufficiency of the number of petitions by the supervisor of elections. And this would be a question for our supervisor of elections, but I'm assuming that what our supervisor would tell us is that that would absolutely occur prior to this coming general election, that it wouldn't be something that would happen, that they could delay it. But I don't know, you said there was kind of tactics that go into that?
Yeah, and I would offer a thought when the supervisor is able to join us. I think this would be a useful bit of discussion to have. Keep in mind that I'll show you the current language. And this is not unique language, by the way. This exact sentence or something, this phraseology very similar to this, is found in a lot of county charters throughout the state. Each charter amendment proposed by petitioners to be placed on the ballot by resolution of the Board of County Commissioners for the general election occurring in excess of 90 days from, note what it's 90 days from, the certification by the supervisor of elections that the requisite number of signatures has been verified. Keep in mind, and for members of the public too, when they think through this, the supervisor of elections can't sit down and verify all those signatures and count them all in a day. And the question becomes, and I've seen wildly different results in different counties and different times, does it take X days or does it take many more days? And does it push it over the limit because somebody cut it too close? And as a result, it bumps 2 years down the road. And I've seen in Osceola County, the very thing almost happened, where it was going to miss a deadline when a group was trying to put a charter amendment on that ballot, and it was teetering on the edge of breaking this or not, because it came down to how quickly the supervisor was going to count those signatures. It's just a thought to keep in mind.
Just to clarify, under Florida law, a general election means any November election of an even year, whether it be the gubernatorial years or the presidential years.
A general election under the Florida Election Code, yeah, is the November election in an even numbered year.
Okay. That's a lot to take in. Anybody thoughts, comments, concerns, questions?
This is why we're throwing information at you early here to take it in, and then you can have discussions now and discussions later.
Commissioner Steck.
My major was political science, so this stuff, I love this stuff, so that's why. But elections cost money, so the more special elections you have, the greater expense that is incurred by whatever government entity it is. And to Mr. Bose's point, people could say, well, let's put it on a general election ballot and hide it. Or they could say, let's put it on the general election ballot, and on the other side, and say, let's get as many people to look at this as possible. So you can make arguments for both sides. I'm concerned that frankly, the provision the way it is sounds good to me, just simply because there's an opportunity to have a special election, but it's assumed generally that it will go in one of the 2 even year elections under normal circumstances.
And if the county commission approves a charter amendment, it's subject to public hearing, and people are going to know about it. It's going to be scrutinized. And if they chose to do a special election, that would also be subject to a public hearing, and people would have a chance to voice their opinions about that. And so the county commission clearly is going to operate in the sunshine. So the special election only applies to their initiated ballot questions. It doesn't apply to petition initiated or our commission initiated. So I agree with you. I mean, I don't really, at first blush, don't see a real reason to change anything. But Commissioner Eggers?
Well, I'm not sure I totally understood that from what you said, so I want to make sure I'm clear. I frankly think that anytime you're changing a charter, it should get, the most people actively voting on that item. And so to me, I don't understand why you wouldn't just leave it at, not leave it the way it is, but make it just general election so that it's in November, it's in the gubernatorial year or the presidential year. You get the most people out. That's what you're looking for a charter review change. I mean, to me, short of that, you're opening up the idea of strategic game playing. And I think it should be that way on all three paths that we have. They should all go to general election. I think, again, it keeps it simple. I mean, maybe that's going to be the theme of the night for me. Maybe that's my mindset today, but also that I just think it's the right thing to do when you're trying to make a major change to a charter.
Commissioner Jennings?
Yeah, I concur with Commissioner Egger's sentiments. I think at least at a minimum, I don't like the idea of the citizen petition review. You have citizens that go out there, work hard to organize, raise money. They think that they're working, doing all this work to get on a general ballot, only to have, a small group of folks decide something else. I just think that at a minimum, we should consider stripping that from the citizen initiative.
I don't think that applies to citizen initiative, does it, Mr. Bose?
With regard to the citizen initiative, as I mentioned, it's the default is it goes on the general, but the Board of County Commissioners can set it to a different special called election.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that then, that those should go on the general election for sure. So I do think we need to look at this. So do you have enough information to bring us back maybe a proposal on that?
Yeah, if that's something put together, absolutely. We can bring you back something to take a look at along those lines.
Is everyone comfortable with looking at language, making all of this uniformly general elections? Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Just to be clear, when we're talking about uniform to general election, are we talking about just charter amendments by initiative petition, or are we looking at the board as well?
I think Commissioner Eggers is our county commissioner here, and he suggested all three of them should be general elections, right?
That's what I was thinking. Yep.
So that's fine with me.
Not very complicated charter amendments in this instance. So yeah, we can take a look at implementing that along all of them, then the commission can take a look at it.
Okay, so that'll come back to us for further discussion. Okay. Moving on to old business, section 6A, draft ballot and charter language, charter amendment revising thresholds for apportionment and removal of, appointment and removal of county attorney.
Thank you, Chairman. Pursuant to your discussion at your November 27th meeting, I went ahead and put together some language implementing revisions to the selection, and appointment, and removal of the county attorney, attempting to model the same format that you have with respect to the county administrator. Of course, the numbers on the County Attorney Oversight Committee are different, so attempt to translate that over as well as possible. It resulted in the addition of the language shown in underline in 4.02 below, but quite frankly, I think the summary tells the story a little bit. Again, just translating over what you have with the county administrator. So the initial draft language reads, Charter Amendment revising thresholds for appointment and removal of county attorney. Shall the Pinellas County Charter be amended to provide that the 12-member County Attorney Oversight Committee shall select and appoint a county attorney by an 8-vote supermajority and may remove the county attorney only by a 7-vote majority at 2 consecutive meetings or by an 8-vote supermajority at 1 meeting. Again, similar language prevails with respect to the county administrator.
Commissioner Eggers, do you have?
Yeah, this is one I've been wrestling with a lot. I think of the 12-person board that we have on the County Oversight Board. But I was also sitting, I think we had some discussion last time, maybe, I don't know if Mike brought it up or not, but where you end up providing an awful lot of decision-making to the county commission. If the county commission is in unison, just takes one county supervisor or one of the constitutionals to side with you, and it's done. So I was thinking, again, a majority plus one with both groups, which to me is, with the county commission, that makes 5 people. And with the 5 members of the constitutionals, that's what we have, it makes 4. So if you have that threshold individually for both groups, collectively you have nine required to fire. And I think that if you get both of those thresholds, then you've effectively done what I think the spirit of it is. And it also spreads it out and provides a little bit more abilities with the constitutionals. So
Would that relate only to the single meeting termination?
I hadn't really thought about splitting it up in single or double or two meetings. I think if it takes 2 meetings and to do something and you want to do it in 1 meeting, it should have the same threshold. I mean, I don't see why it should change. I'm not quite sure the rationale unless I'm not sure what that rationale is.
It was copying what you have with the county administrator.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of cities, for example, to fire the city attorney or the city manager, for example, if you have 5 members of your commission or council, you need 4 out of 5 at 1 meeting to do it, or you need 3 out of 5 at 2 meetings to do it. So I think that what Mr. Vose has drafted in terms of the process is somewhat consistent with what I've seen in other jurisdictions. But I think what you're suggesting, Commissioner Eggers, is that you would like to see a majority of both the county commissioners and the constitutionals agree to fire at 1 sitting?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I think that, to me, it gives both groups the same kind of latitude.
Now, if you had 7 out of 12 at 2 consecutive meetings, are you okay with termination under those circumstances?
Probably we would want more than 7, but I mean, we're talking 9 the way I phrased it already, it's 9, so maybe 8. Something less, but I mean, to me, if you're looking for, I mean, again, you're removing an officer. So if you're going to remove in 1 meeting, it takes 9. I mean, I'm trying to understand, other than that it's done that way, what's the rationale behind if we go to 2 meetings, you lower the threshold to get, I mean, I just understand.
I can offer the rationale I think I would speculate was put in with respect to the similar county administrator provision, and as the chair said, it's a common provision in a lot of, for example, municipal charters, and the idea is this. And folks who are city attorney or county attorney in places, we're on the chopping block at every meeting, all right? But sometimes folks may just fire up a motion and, you're going home that night. But the idea of that is at any 1 meeting, if you're going to do something as important as getting rid of a charter officer like that just by a bare majority, there's a further opportunity for notice, all right? You do it at the 1 meeting, and then you got that 7 votes against you at the 1 meeting, and it's going to come on to the 2nd meeting. Well, that's notice for a lot of things to happen, for discussions to occur. Are the things that need to change? Is this really what's going to be? Does that person want to resign instead of get terminate? Things like this. Whereas you able to put together a supermajority at a given meeting, it's time for you to go. Whether that's good or bad, don't know, but I think that's the rationale why you see it in a lot of charters.
Any other thoughts or comments on the draft? Yes, Commissioner Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to understand why it takes 8 to get hired but 7 to get fired. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, and again, that was translating over the same supermajority requirement to get hired of the county administrator, and then to get fired, either supermajority at a given meeting or majority at 2 meetings.
So I can't do the math, but the county administrator, it's 80% of the county commissioners.
Let me take a look at,
5 of 7.
I think it's.
What is the
I think
To
it's.
get
I think
higher,
it's-
I'm an
5 of 7.
educator.
I think it's 5 of
apologize.
7, yeah, and the,
It's a little over 70.
So to get hired, it's 5 of 7, and to be fired, it's 4 of 7 at 2 consecutive meetings. Or it's 5 of 7 at 1 meeting. And I think when we talked about this, the last time we talked about this, I think one of the things Commissioner Eggers pointed out is to hire a county attorney, if you have 7 votes to hire the county attorney, that could be only the county commission. And so if you have 8, necessarily you have to have at least 1 constitutional. I think that was the rationale,
It was.
which makes sense, right? If she's representing
I mean, the
all
the
12.
vote, yeah, the voters last time said it was important that we have this combined group of
Right.
people. So they should both be heard, right? And if you just had 7, potentially the county commission could vote 7 to 5.
Well, I think it should be greater, is my point.
And
Yeah.
I
I'm
agree
in
with you.
Yeah.
And I think the reason we're looking at this is because right now it's silent on how the county attorney's hired and fired. So we just assume that
right,
if
right
there's
now
a majority,
it's, right
a
now it's
majority.
majority hire, majority fire.
Right. And luckily we haven't had to worry about it because we have a great county attorney, so that's good. But it's important to make it clear for someday down the road if and when it becomes necessary to look at it. I'm fine with this language. I think it makes perfect sense. I think it's consistent with what other jurisdictions do. One thing I would want to make sure, and I'm also fine with Commissioner Eggers' language too, about if you're going to fire the county attorney at 1 meeting, that it should be a majority of both bodies. So maybe if you could draft like an option A and an option B, does that make sense for us to look at down the road?
Absolutely. I take it as a personal challenge to throw in additional complicators into ballot language and make it work. I just want to offer the thought, though, sometimes ideas that may be good ideas are difficult to communicate to voters. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of stuff packed in there. You note, for example, I put in there the 12-member county attorney oversight committee, because I guarantee you members of the public have no idea how many folks are on the county attorney oversight committee or anything like this. So that's sharing that with the voters so they can understand, oh, this 7-vote, 8-vote bet, now I can do the math, I can understand that. So we can take a hack at adding it in.
75%, you know, that hits 9. I mean, that's the 9 of 12.
Yeah.
That's pretty straightforward. And then if you wanted to introduce an easier pathway in 2 meetings, you could do 75% less 1. I'm not trying to, that starts to complicate things a little.
And that's to your earlier point,
Yeah.
simplicity is a
Yeah.
great goal to get to, and I'm not stopping any, potential policy direction, I'm just throwing that out that we'll
And I
work through,
certainly-
see what we got.
And I'm certainly not saying getting into the majority plus one, just 75% is the number that I'm talking about, which represents what I said. So it's not, I want to simplify the language, but.
Yes, Vice Chair.
To your point about educating voters, and this isn't necessarily has to do with this specific item, but is it part of our responsibility as the CRC to put out some kind of educational materials that provide context? Because some of these things are complicated, even if we try to simplify them as much as possible. So that's, once they get through, the county commission and we're getting ready to put them on the ballot, I'm just thinking, as somebody has worked with the League of Women Voters and educating voters, I'm like, whew, some of this stuff is going to be tough to communicate, right?
Mm-hmm. So, and that is, that's definitely a discussion we're get into greater detail on as we get in the tail end of your work. Some tools that used to be available to charter review commissions are not as available anymore. Just as an example, Orange County's Charter Review Commission every 4 years used to prepare a pamphlet that would explain, in straight language, not advocacy one way or the other, what it is, what the legal effect of these things are. And they would, since the 80s, they would mail these out to every registered voter. It cost a lot of money, but they would mail it out to every registered voter. That is not legal under current law and under recent changes to Florida law. That does not mean there are not things the CRC can or CRC members can participate in to educate the public or anything like that, and we can discuss that further. And commissioners, I apologize. I was kicked off of Zoom here. That's how I was controlling the screen and have been unable to get back on, but give me just 1 second.
Mr. Chair, just in response to the issue, just to remind everyone with the CRC that this body will ultimately approve a report. Now, the report is going to be obviously much more detailed and elaborate to get to your findings and recommendations and what goes forward. So I just want to remind you there is a report that will be generated and approved by this body, but that's not something probably you're going to be mailing to every voter. It's probably a much more detailed report than most people would read.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, thoughts on the county attorney appointment and removal provision, the draft? And I think, Mr. Vos, you have some direction on providing another option?
I think so, yeah. I'll take a hack at some additional drafts.
Okay. All right. Moving on to item 6B, initial draft ballot and charter language county charter cleanup amendment. And this is items B1 through 4.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And actually, give me 1 second because I want to get this up and see what, here we go. Yes, so commissioners, this is kind of a placeholder to throw additional matters as we proceed if further cleanup matters arise. Wanted to give you something to start out with. In the course of your initial discussions, a number of matters have come up, and they are summarized in this initial draft. Basically, the draft removes one-time provisions that have since occurred or lapsed, namely the reconstitution of the 2004 Charter Review Commission. If you recall, there's a whole big section in there just about that kind of historical instance. Section 4.02a, actually I can go ahead and show you these as we go. Section 4.02a, in the context of provisions that have since occurred or are no longer applicable, there was a provision that was put in back in 2016 to effectively grandfather the then current county attorney, because he had been hired under the old rules, and the concern was to change the rules in the middle. But the then county attorney has retired, and so there's no one to which this is applicable anymore, and so this can come out in a cleanup amendment. In addition, we discussed the removal of gender references. Throughout, references to he and his have been changed, usually to the appropriate officer's name. That's a typical way to do it. He or she tends to have a number of different issues, grammatical and otherwise, in any event, as well as changing references to chairman and vice chairman with respect to some of the boards created by the Charter Review Commission to chair and vice chair, which I understand is consistent with the actual county usage for the Board of County Commissioners. And then removing references to certain organizations that no longer exist. My office is still finishing up its more comprehensive review of all the spiderweb of special laws that are referenced in Section 5.02 of the Charter, but one of them that jumped out at us when reviewing everything was the Pinellas County Industry Council, which the special act that created it was repealed many years ago, and it no longer exists. Everything that it had was transferred to the county, and so I would suggest purely as a cleanup matter that could come out. So again, I'm not asking for any action on this tonight, just wanted to let you all know that we have a placeholder in which to put other cleanup items as they arise as well. We have a brief charter amendment or ballot language here to summarize what those changes are. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bose. Any questions, comments, concerns on the draft cleanup? Looks great to me. Good job, as always. Okay. Moving on to item 6C, proposed Florida House Bill 57 and Senate Bill 438 regarding term limits for county commissioners.
You going to be handling that
Yes,
one,
I guess
Doug?
I can take that. Clearly, as we're working our way through the various topics that the CRC members have asked to explore, not surprisingly, term limits was an item of considerable interest. So we wanted the CRC members to at least be aware of the fact that there is action taking place up in Tallahassee as we speak. There are two bills that I've included in your packet. One is a Senate Bill 438, and the other is a House Bill 57, thank you, that I've given you the draft language for. That's the latest as of earlier this week. I do know that they've been referred to committee. I've given you a copy of a bill analysis and fiscal impact statement that came out of the Senate side. There's nothing, at least at the time the delivery of the agenda material went out last week, there was nothing on the House side of it. This is really for your background information because I know that there's going to be an interest in discussing this topic here, so we wanted you to be aware at least of the discussion taking place in Tallahassee. We don't know what the outcome will be. It's in the front end of the session, as we all know at this stage, so we just wanted you to be aware of that and whether or not both of those bills talk about an 8-year limitation, although there is a difference between the Senate bill and the House bill as it relates to members that would be in a district, and after 8 years, then they would be prohibited for 2 years even filing for an at-large district position. So there is some distinction between the two bills. I suspect that will all shake itself out as it works it through, but we want to make sure that you're aware of those conversations as you're discussing this matter here as well.
Okay. This is informational regarding the legislation that's pending in Tallahassee. Any comments, questions about that? We'll obviously follow that as we move forward. Okay, other business. Is there any other business before we get to the upcoming meeting schedule? Seeing none, our next meeting is scheduled, yes. Yes, sir, we had public comment earlier, but since you were not here for it, I will use my discretion as the chair to allow you to speak for 3 minutes on any topic. But if you want to speak for 3 minutes, you need to see this gentleman here at the table where it says sign in here, sign a card, and then we'll give you 3 minutes to speak, okay? All right, I'm going to move that to the end of the agenda. Let's talk about the upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is Wednesday, January 31st at 6 p.m. in this room. I'm assuming that's okay with the majority of everyone. Mr. Thomas, have we had anybody, we don't have any quorum concerns or issues with that?
No quorum concerns. I know that at least your state senator is not going to be able to make that meeting because of session. I do have some clarification. I know Terry had, Commissioner Scott had reached out to me on a question, so I've got some clarifications on some potential meeting dates here as well. So.
Okay, well, let's get through it. So after the January 31st meeting, the suggestion is to move back to first and third Wednesdays. I know we're currently holding Monday, February 12th. I would prefer to clear that date if we could, because I do have a conflict with that date. But would you like to take the lead on that, Mr. Thomas?
Sure. So when we were, we started on first and third Wednesdays, as I recall, in this process. And then we got into the holidays and we had to scramble, and it got to be a bit of a challenge for everyone to go to try to find dates. So we did land on, obviously, tonight's meeting and then the 31st. And then we had talked about some other dates where there was some interest there. But since that time, there's been a number of folks that are now talking about trying to get back to a regular schedule. So we originally had talked about the February 12th date and also a February 26th date. But if you wanted to return to the first and third, then those are the dates that we've identified in the agenda. So, but I know Commissioner Scott had indicated she's got now a conflict because she was on for the other two dates that took place. So we just need to get some direction about whether we want to hold the two dates that you just said you had a conflict with, or whether we want to go back to the first and third after next week.
Commissioner Scott, yeah, please.
Thank you. Yes, information was provided to us, Doug, that you provided with dates of the 22nd, the 31st of January, and the 12th and 26th of February. And based upon the dates that you provided, needless to say, I scheduled something for the 21st, which would be the regularly scheduled meeting, which wasn't an option, which it appeared.
I see what I saw what you were getting at when I caught up to your email, yeah.
Exactly. These were the dates that you stated that others would be available.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I made other arrangements for the 21st for a speaking engagement.
So why don't we do this, if it's okay with everybody, and I don't want to get into a super complicated thing where we're all looking at our phones, so maybe we'll just leave it the way it is. But what I would propose, based on Commissioner Scott's schedule and my schedule, let's proceed with the meeting on the 31st. Let's cancel the meeting on February 12th, and let's proceed with the meeting on February 26th. Does that fit with everyone's schedule? And then we'll go to March 6th, March 20th, April 3rd, and April 17th, and I think that'll give us more than ample time to get through everything.
Does that work out? So next week on the 31st, cancel the one on the 12th, meet on February 26th, and then follow the March dates thereafter.
Correct.
Right.
And I think that gives us plenty of time.
Originally, those were dates that were cleared, so we're assuming that's still the case? Yep. Apologies for that confusion. I caught up to your email, so yep.
No problem. Does anybody have any concerns with that proposed schedule? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And if you will coordinate communicating those to us formally, and so we can get them all calendar invites and get them all on our calendars, that would be great. Yes, sir. Okay, we have two more public comments. First, we will start with Mr. Pound. And Mr. Pound, if you would approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to address the board, okay?
Thank you, Greg Pound, Largo. As you were speaking about term limits, and we're talking here about limitations of power, and I was just going to ask, as you work through our charter for this county, I mean, in other counties that you've worked in, have you found anything like we have, it talks about limitations of power, and so when you talk about limitation of term limits, as he was explaining it, I didn't quite hear what they're asking. Are they asking for more time? They want to extend their time, or they just want to keep it? So, I didn't hear that. So, but in this county, we have a problem. And we have, for instance, we have a separation of power clause. You guys understand that, right? And you understand the Constitution and how James Madison put that in our Constitution to protect us from, tyranny. And so what happens when we have, I don't know if you know this, but we have Jim Coates' lawyer as our sheriff. He goes up in Tallahassee and states he's an attorney and also the sheriff. And this is simple. This is real simple stuff for people that are representing us and being in office to represent us in this county and through the state. We have a separation of power clause to protect us. And I was just going to say that, if you guys look at our county and see the stuff we have going on, and if they can't abide by the Constitution, they shouldn't be in office. That's pretty much what I got to say. As you guys represent us, any deputy on the sheriff department would be a legal sheriff than Jim Coates' lawyer, Robert Guattari. So, and they're afraid, those guys are afraid to stand up because they'll lose their job. So, but we just need the people like in this room that control what's going on and going to influence us. You got to hold these people accountable. It's like right in our face, and everyone looks the other way. So, it's so if you guys can hold it in some kind of check and balance, it'd be nice.
Thank you, sir. Our next comment is from Mr. Mark Johnson.
I'd like to say good evening to the commission, board, and members. And I want to say I'm kind of appreciative to have the opportunity this coming and say love to you guys again. You know, that's kind of like my duty anymore. The Lord called me to say love, okay? Now, a lot of folks don't understand what that means. And it's okay because that's where they're at. But when we study the word of him that really put all this together and put us together, his name is love. God is love. And without him, there is no love. Now, it took me a few years to really grasp that, but now that I've grasped it, I want everybody to know who God is. I want everybody to know God is love, and love means doing what's right. Now, I worked for the county years ago. I went in the military. My whole thing was to find real life and the real joy of life. What is that? How do you get that? I wasn't trained that as a young guy. I did not know that. And even I went in the military, by the way, looking for love. I thought the military certainly would have a way to teach young men love. But I found confusion more than love, because what has happened is we've missed what's really going on. And what's going on? We got a verse of scripture I wanted to share with you real quick from the book of Ephesians, chapter 6. And this is what it says: for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, I was trained that one man was over another man, and therefore, that's the way life is. But as I learned life, I learned that all men are right here together. And the problem with us is we're born in those principalities and powers that's running the world. And so we run the world in the mind of the evil one rather than the one that had put all us together and brought us to love each other and to know love. The joy of the Lord today is my strength. When I'm working for you, I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to promote what's right. I'm going to drink and use the kind of stuff that's right. Why? Because when I'm working for you, I'm working for God. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Now, we need to learn that. And that's what's going to help this county really be the county that it's supposed to be, the one that God intended to be. Thank you.